Greetings and welcome back to the Empathy Dojo. We are in month 2, which is our month on boundaries. So week 2 of module 2, boundaries module. If you remember last week, we were all into the three lights, starting the week off. And we talked about green light, green means go, hey, we're chill. Nobody's fight or flight system has been activated. And we talked a little bit about the amygdala hijack and even peppered in a bit of the Gottman ratio about, why it's not a great idea, aside from the fact that amygdala hijacks make us less capable of thinking, empathizing, etc. But also once we start putting in the type of things we say when we're amygdala hijacked, that reduces the quality of the relationship. And so hopefully I convinced you that you want to, like, at least for your crucial conversations, your challenging conversations, you want to have those in green and yellow light whenever possible. And when red light comes, we take a break. So getting into today's work, now we're going to start to get into some of the crunchiness of the yellow, and then more of like how to deal with red. That's where the boundaries part, we're going to do that next week, because like I said, my experience as a coach has been that a lot of the conflict where we need to make these boundaries and these red lights and consequences and stuff, that's actually, a lot of it's unnecessary if we know all the other capacities, components, thank you, of our communication skills. If we know those other components, then a lot of times, like making a hard boundary and a consequence and stuff, you don't even have to do that. So we're putting that on last because there are times where you have to do that. But all of this other work is more important, or maybe you could say primary. Maybe they're as important, but this work is primary. So we're going to talk today about how to call red light, how to call a red light. And I want to introduce a couple things. Let me check out my notes. Yes. Oh, is that all one class? No, that's not all one class. Ha ha ha. Excuse me. I'm just trying to decipher my own notes. I'm a little tired. We're moving house, and we've been traveling, and some of you already know this. And so I'm a little tired. I'm in a random office at the studio where Maria is recording her next album. And all of that actually puts me primed for yellow and red light. So the first thing I want to talk to you about, the first thing that'll happen in your notes, is in a crucial conversation, the first tactic I want you to have is to ask for yellow, So this is your first tactic, ask for yellow. And it's on my mind because I tried to do that this morning in my talk. I was giving a sermon. It's Sunday here in my time. um, I was giving a sermon on conflict resolution, and stuff like that. And some people had asked for live practice examples. Like, I love these concepts. Let's do more live practice. So I was like, all right, today is the day. Let's go. And I asked specifically, okay, start me with an easy one, because I knew the one that was going to come up for everyone in this particular population was vaccine issues. And the live audience was primarily liberal, pro-vax liberal, as far as I know, because I don't know who the guests were, but I know that the audience who would be watching the recording or listening to the podcast might not be that. And so I really wanted to go into that topic with some care if we were going to go into it. And so I wanted to give some examples that weren't that, to get us warmed up. And somebody went right in. I said, give me an easy one. Let's start it out slow. Not the worst one, not the most triggering. And they went right in. Oh, this, blah, blah, blah. And I totally lost my cool on the inside. On the outside, ooh, I was epic. The recording didn't come out very well, or I would show you the recording, because I pulled through. But what I realized after the fact, because I felt pretty stressed out about it, and I didn't respond quite up to my values. Like I set a pretty high bar for myself, actually. And what I realized was like, oh, wow, I was red there. I had asked for yellow, and they steamrolled ahead, and then I was in the red, right? And so fortunately, I went yellow on myself and did a bunch of self-regulation. Oh, so cool, so epic, great. But it's on my mind that if one can ask for, so let's take like the vaccination and COVID and what are we going to do about it and all that stuff. because it's alive right now. May not be when someone watches this recording. Gosh, that's a beautiful vision. But what's going on with this issue is that it's about life or death, and it's about personal freedom. And those are two issues that will immediately, whenever they're on the table, they will immediately throw you into the fight or flight survival mechanism, no matter how cool you are or what other tools you have. The moment an issue involves survival or involves personal freedom, you can expect it to be, if you've got two sides talking about it, you can expect the emotions to run high, and likely before you even start, you'll be in the red. Oh, so that's an example that I want to give you. So we're on the concept, and I'll put this in your notes this way, but the concept is you can ask for a yellow. Did I just mute myself? No, I didn't. Good. You can ask for a yellow. And one of the reasons why you might want to do that, here's how the flow is going. Even in my tired brain, there's a flow of consciousness going on here, is because you'll walk into some conversations, and if you don't prep, they will already be in the red before you start the conversation, just by the subject matter. You can expect it to go red. And then unless you're in agreement, you won't make any progress, right? Rapport is practically impossible if you're already in the red. So the first tactic is you can request a yellow, and we'll do some of this in our live meeting this month. But I just wanted to suggest that, you think about saying things like, you and I have different views about this, and I expect it to be emotionally intense. Most people can go there with you. They can go like, yeah, okay, cool. And it's really cool if you frame the conversation like that. A lot of time, just acknowledging the fact, oh, this is going to be intense. Um, you develop rapport around that, and you can engage in the conversation more like a cooperation than a competition, because just even that much rapport, it's really cool. So, if there's something in the relationship, like an intimate relationship, you can bring it up with, I know this has been hard for us to talk about in the past. Can I invoke, use your own language. I'm just going to use hippy dippy language because it's on my mind. Can I invoke our best selves? Or, let's bring our most empathetic selves to the table. Or let's use the lists. We're both in the empathy dojo or whatever. Let's use these lists, so we can ask for yellow light. And then instead of having to backpedal where your partner is like, they go off and then you're like, hey, use the protocol, or some of the things that I've seen happen. Instead of that, you can go like, oh, hey, remember, we're in yellow and we've already gained rapport. So it's easier to request a yellow than to call a red. Here's kind of your second point, right? One, you can ask for a yellow. When? Well, because in conversations where you already know things are going to be triggered, for your partner or your buddy, it's a triggering subject for them. This is like where content warnings come up, right? I mentioned that before, but you can say, hey, I know this is triggering. What will it take for us to be able to have this conversation in a safe, comfortable, constructive fashion? And just asking those questions can actually, it can bring up like a whole new thing. It can be really cool. So you're allowed to ask for a yellow in topics that are going to be triggering. And then the other point with that subsidiary point is that it's easier to have asked for a yellow than it is to call a red. Because if you've tried this, one of the things, and I want to give you some hacks for this, but one of the things that can be hard is if you're already in a triggered conversation and then you go, hey, red light, it's sometimes likely that the other person is just going to stay pissed off. They're just going to, they'll ramp up, or things like that. So that's part of why, like I mentioned, when I teach couples this, I have them agree to this system. And then oftentimes we'll need to use it in the coaching situation a couple times, because you have to have a referee there to make you stay agreed to it. So it's easier to ask for a yellow than it is to call a red. But let's do two tactics of when you want to call a red. I think there's only going to be two today. Yes, two tactics. When you want to call red, how to do it, how to avoid the pushback, the refusal, etc. And then what happens is like, okay, I'm in a red, I called a red, they refused, I just had to leave, I just had to go and slam a door, shout them, so that they would leave me the F word alone. You don't want that. It's you can tell I'm speaking from personal experience here, and and from seeing it in coaching. So calling a red, the best way to do it, the most effective way, even if you're justified in noticing that they are amygdala hijacked, the most effective way is to do it in an I statement. So for example, I'm feeling a little triggered and I'm going to need to take a pause because this conversation is important to me and I want to bring my best self to the table. I'll put that in your notes as a script that you could follow. It works really well. I'm feeling a little triggered. I'm going to need to take a pause because this conversation is important to me and I want to bring my best self to the table. Okay, what did you do in there? Well, in the middle, you're not making the pause optional. You're not saying, I'm feeling really triggered. Would you be willing to? No, we're in the red. You're going to have to call a pause. But instead of saying, you sound pretty triggered, okay? So, like I said, they may be way triggered, but that's that's starting another debate, right? You're making a diagnosis of them. And have you tried this? Have you tried telling someone that they're triggered? It often, like, unless you're in a therapeutic environment and they're like, hey, tell me when I'm triggered, and they actually meant that, often I haven't experienced personally or seen in during facilitation that you go, hey, you're triggered right now, and they go like, oh yeah, you got me. How I better go moderate myself. Usually doesn't work. If you say I'm triggered right now, and the person has your best interest in heart. Remember, we're not in the like cut them off red. We're in the red between intimates, the red between beloveds, relationships you are invested in maintaining sometime in the future. Then when you say I'm triggered, it invokes their like, oh, okay, crap. How do we do this? I'm going to need to take a pause. Okay, you give them something we can do. Oh, great. And then you say, because this is important to me. So the idea is not like I'm triggered and leaving them. This is especially because it's easy for people like me who are avoidant attachment styles to call a red and go like, oh, we're feeling emotions. I better get the hell out of here. If you've had that done to you, it's not very pleasant. And then it's especially unpleasant if you're more on the anxious attachment style or more on the borderline codependent personality style. Like, I don't mean these as diagnoses, just kind of like the flavors of us, the ones who like to merge more and the ones of us who like to push away more. Well, if you say I'm triggered, we got to pause, and that's all you give someone with that more anxious or with the more merging style, it feels like an assault to them. It actually, like, so when I'm doing it, it's to keep me safe and to keep them safe from my emotions. Oh no. But to them, it feels like abandonment. So I'm feeling triggered. I'm going to need to pause. And then you let them know, why am I pausing? Because this is so important to me. We are reestablishing that underlying belongingness, our commonality, that love that's between us, because this is so important to me. And I want to be bringing my best self to the table. Okay, so this is your protocol. Now you can rewrite that into some other version, but it's always the I statement. It may not be that you're triggered. You may be asking, hey, let's pause this conversation as a group. But if you use this I statement, I'm feeling uncomfortable with the volume of our conversation. I'm going to need to pause. Or would you be, if it was a group, you might say, would you all be willing to pause? Something like that. Because this subject is so important that I want us to bring our best selves to the table. Okay, the last thing you need to know is this is the rule I learned from my mentor, Scott Katamas. When you take a red light, especially in a coupleship where you have established this, what you do is you go and do the self-compassion kata. You remember that. Presence, and then what am I telling myself? What am I feeling? What am I needing? We'll go into that a little more deeply in the next lesson. But the whole idea is, and your partner knows that we call red light, and then we're going to go away and do the self-compassion kata. And then you come back, usually within 24 hours. If it's an intimate relationship, there's a commitment that I will check back in with you in 24 hours. And it may even be that you check in and you say, I'm still too triggered to talk about that. But the cool thing is that we're reestablishing, reasserting that underlying belongingness and the fact that the relationship is important to us. It's not, oh, I went red light. Now we're not talking about that anymore. It's, I went red light. I want to talk about this with you in a constructive way. And so I'm going to need to pause until my nervous system is regulated back to, you remember the sign, you can imagine what the other person's feeling and needing. So to do that, we go and do the self-empathy kata. More on that next round and tomorrow in a minute, however you're watching these. But for now, these are our basic things. You can call a yellow. That's the one I really want you to know. It's easier than calling a red. And when you call a red, I statement, and then reassert, it's because I value you. I value this conversation. I want to bring my best self to the table. Go away and make an appointment to come back. All right, more on that. We're just getting started, but let's end on time, and I'll see you next time.